Good day to all. Today we are going to discuss about how to construct an appropriate research objectives for research proposal or research paper. Today we have seen many researchers got stuck with their thesis, dissertation and struggling to frame objectives even for the research paper. They don't know where to start compiling it from. It is a common saying that well begin is off time. So we can start with the research objectives. As we are all aware that research objectives acts as the base for research work. Once the research objective is formulated, then it will be easy for the researcher to assemble the rest of the things in no time, because a clearly defined objectives direct a researcher in the right direction. The objectives of the research project summarizes what is to be achieved by the researcher. Research objectives and research aims. What do they really mean? This is another question. The research aim and objectives determine the scope, depth, and overall direction of the research. It provides answer to the research question. Moreover, the research aim instructs the researcher what is to be achieved. Hence, formulating research aim and objectives in an appropriate manner are one of the vital aspects of the project or dissertation or thesis, whatever it is. There are certain common mistakes that can be noted while formulating the research aim. For example, choosing broad topic or setting an unrealistic aim or choosing mismatched method within the time frame available. Now we can see what is the mistake in choosing the broad topic. Choosing too broad topic is the major common mistake that can be noted in most of the cases. Here we have the example. The topic has been given as analysis of leadership practices. The above topic is said to be too broad because it fails to answer the following questions. First one is, which aspect of the leadership practices? The leadership practices has many aspects such as employee motivation, ethical behavior, strategic planning, change management, etc. If the researcher makes an attempt to cover all these aspects of organizational leadership practices within a single research, will result in a poor work. Hence, it is not advisable to choose too broad area for the study. Then another question arises, in which country? Because leadership practices tend to be different in various countries due to cross-cultural differences, legislation, and a range of other regional specific factors. Therefore, a study of leadership practices needs to be country specific. Again, another question arises, which company or industry? Then, similar to the above point, analysis of leadership practices needs to take into account industry specific and company specific differences. And I am sure there is no way to conduct a leadership research that relates to all industries and organizations in an equal manner. Considering the above mistakes arising out of choosing a broad topic, we can reframe the topic as a study on the impact of ethical behavior of a leader on the level of employee motivation in Indian healthcare sectors, because it implies the country specific, industry specific, then what kind of a leadership practices is going to be analyzed, on what aspect it is to be analyzed. Everything has been mentioned in a clear way. So, the researcher should take all the aspects of the said questions while framing the research topic.
The second mistake in setting up a research aim is unrealistic goal. If the researcher aims involves in-depth interviews with famous group of companies or eminent personalities would be of no possibilities. If you see the example here, a study that aims at interviewing at Apple strategic management level by an ordinary research scholars or PG or UG level students in India can be a little overambitious. Very rare possibilities are available. This is because getting an interview with Apple CEO or members of Apple management board might not be easy. This is an extreme example, but the researcher got an alternate idea. Instead, they can aim to interview the manager of their local Apple store. Another mistake we can notice among the researchers who are struggling to complete the thesis is because of mismatched methods within the time frame. Because the time frame available needs to be taken into account while formulating the research objectives. Selecting an unsuitable method is due to the lack of proper knowledge and awareness about the methodologies regarding sample selection, collection of data, and tools to be followed for different kinds of research. Hence, due care must be taken in these areas as well. Research objectives. It is not enough to have a research topic alone, but to have research statements of what is expected as an outcome. Hence, research objectives are the goals that the researcher sets in their study that they want to achieve through their study. It informs the readers what they want to research and how far they want to go to. It also informs the readers about the scope and the extent of the study. The formulation of research objectives will help the researcher to focus on the study with clearly defined ideas. As a thumb rule, there should be only one research aim and there can be many research objectives.
Here we have some example. The research title is to know the effects of organizational culture on business profitability with reference to some ABC Limited. The research aim would be to assess the effects of organizational culture on business profitability. Accordingly, we can frame the research objectives as step-by-step method. First one, to analyze the culture of the organization for the said company. Second thing, what are the factors that influences ABC Limited organizational culture? And finally, we can analyze the impact of organizational culture on profitability. In case if the researcher would like to give some recommendations, they can give to the management and what are all the terms. The effectiveness of organizational culture can be increased for future progress.
The research objectives forms the basis for the research work. It guides the researcher in every aspect of the project and offers measurable targets to hit and make the terms understand what is expected of them. They also provide an accurate description of the specific actions the researcher needs to take in order to reach his aim. It also supports the researcher in solving problems that he or she has defined in their study. Moreover, it helps to avoid the collection of unnecessary data which are irrelevant for the study. We have seen the importance of objectives. Now, the characteristics of objectives should be relevant to the topic, it should be feasible, it should be arranged in a logical manner. More importantly, it should be observable and unambiguous. Framing SMART objectives. What it really means. Most of us might have heard about this abbreviation for framing quality objectives. Research objectives need to be formulated according to SMART, where the abbreviation stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Specific. The objective should be clear and unambiguous. It should give details of how and what the researcher is intended to achieve. The next one is measurable. The objective should be quantifiable or measurable. This can be done by assigning a numeric value to the objectives by answering the questions like how many, how much, etc.
The next one is achievable. The objectives should be feasible, viable, and within the control or capacity of the researcher. While drafting the objectives, the researcher should keep in mind his own capacity, constraints, and abilities to achieve the objectives. The next one is realistic. While drafting the objectives, the researcher has to ensure that the objectives are realistic and can be attained within the resources available with the researcher. As we discussed in our previous slides under common mistakes, setting up an unrealistic aim and objectives will be a waste of time and should be avoided. The last one is time bound. It is important to give a time frame for completing a particular objective. This helps in timely delivery of outputs and outcomes. Inadequate time to carry out the research will definitely lead to have a biased results or poor results. Hence, when framing the objectives, the researcher should frame the SMART objectives to ensure the better results. Here we can see the difference between incomplete and SMART objectives. On the left hand side we have some ineffective or incomplete research objectives. On the right hand side we have SMART objectives. Here we can see the difference in a clear way. Left hand side, that is ineffective research objective. A study on employee motivation of Reliance Industry doesn't give any meaning at all. At the same time, if we know the SMART objective, to study the impact of management practices on employee motivation at Reliance Industries is very clear and concise. It aims to study the impacts of management practices on the motivation of employees at Reliance Industries. It gives the scope and clear idea what the researcher is intended to study. Likewise, the second example, if we see the consumer behavior in hotel industry have no meaning at all. On the other hand, if we see the SMART objectives, it analyzes the changes in consumer behavior in hotel industry with reference to the consumer preferences in the 21st century. So, the research objective should be in position to give clear idea what is to be done, how it is to be done. It can be possible only if the researcher frames SMART objectives.
Now comes to the type of research objectives. Whatever may be the research type, we have only two types of research objectives. One is main objective, another one is sub-objectives. The more precisely you formulate your research objective, the simpler it will be to define the type of study or which method or methods you have to follow for further research. For example, if you want to study the level of knowledge on recommended managerial practices related to the managerial status of administrative officials working in some XY limited company, whatever it is, the overall objective should be written is as an infinite sentence. Example, to analyze the association between managerial practices and the managerial status of administrative officials in XY limited company.
Here we can see that overall objective states exactly how the researcher intended to address the problem. The researcher can find the answer to problem A, that is for the general objectives, by completing the action B, that is by framing the special or secondary or sub-objective. We can frame the sub-objectives or special objectives like the following. Like, first, the researcher can analyze the knowledge level of administrative officials on the managerial practices. Secondly, the researcher can assess the managerial status or the occupational level of administrative officials in the XY limited company or whatever it is. Finally, the researcher can analyze the statistical association between managerial knowledge level and managerial status of administrative officials in XY Limited company. Hence, the specific objectives should help the main objective to be achieved in a methodological or a systematical way.
We have seen the type of research objectives. Now we are going to discuss about the research objectives in various type of research. First thing, we are going to discuss about the research objectives in quantitative research. The quantitative research tries to determine the relationship between variables through mathematical or statistical data. The research objectives in this type of research is more objective and focus, and the focus of the study is very narrow and measurable. Here we can cite some examples for quantitative research. If you see the examples here, the first example would be to determine the relationship between time spent by students with regard to their grades obtained. Second thing, to predict the rising rate of bullying experiences of students results in greater students drop out from the schools. Another example here is to determine the impact of rise in number of students' assignments on their grades. In these examples, we can find the relationship between two variables, and the outcome can be given in numerical form. For example, we can get the time spent by the students in a numerical form. Likewise, the grades can be measured in numerical form also. Now, the research objectives in the qualitative research. The qualitative research is targeted more towards the individual behavior and preferences rather than statistical data. Here, the research objective in this type is more subjective, and focus the study is more complex and too broad. Here, we have some examples how the research objective should be in qualitative research. As we said, the qualitative research mainly aims at individual behaviors and preferences. We have some examples to determine the level of satisfaction of customers about the environment of hotel or shop. It is mainly studying about the customer satisfaction, how the customer is satisfied while they are entering to the hotel or a shop, whether they are getting enlightened or bored or some changes to be needed. Likewise, in qualitative research, the individual's attributes plays a vital role. Their preferences, their attitude and behavior plays a vital role. Sometimes the marketer also conducts some research about new product development or to know the changes in consumer preferences. Before conducting such a type of market research objectives need to be defined. Research objectives quite simply answer a simple question. Why are they conducting this market research? Of course, the question does not have a simple answer. The answer can go down in depth and become 10 more questions even. For example, if we ask the marketer the reason for conducting such a type of research, that whether they want to go to find out the strength of their brand or to find out about the competition sales figures, like that. With no doubt, with each question, the research objective changes and the research methodology also will change accordingly.
Descriptive research objectives help the researcher to find out why certain action has been taken. If we see the example here, we can find out why customers are preferring certain particular products or why they buy the products. Likewise, why the dealers are promoting only particular products in their locality. Like that, the descriptive research aims at analyzing the qualitative aspects of the research. Hence, it is called the principal methods in the social science researches. Casual research objectives helps the researcher to know what are the cause and effects of the research. This mainly incorporates various elements of cause and effects in the questionnaire. For example, if the company wants to introduce new product in the market, then it will go for analyzing what will be the effect of the new product in the market, whether the market will accept or reject the product, or in case if it is rejected, what can be the causes for rejection. So to find out the cause and effect relationship, this kind of research will help.
We can sum up the research objectives that it is a clear, concise and declarative statement, and it provides the direction to the researcher to investigate the variables and for further study. While framing the research objective, one should be thorough with the variables. And remember once again that research objective should summarize as what is to be achieved by the study, and it is closely related to the statement of the problem. Then action words should be used in framing the objectives: to compare, to verify, to calculate, to describe, like that. And it should cover all the aspects of the problem and should be arranged in coherent and logical way. Another thing, how the research objective should be stated in a research proposal or a statement. The research objectives can be stated in any one of the following three forms. It can be in question format, or it can be in a positive sentence, or it can be as hypothesis. It is according to the discretion of the researcher. We have seen the importance of the research objectives in the last slide. Now, it is to be noted that the research objective should address the following 5 P's or 5 W's. What are the 5 P's stands for? The purpose, procedure, period, place and people. Alternately, we can say 5 W's. The purpose denotes why. The procedure denotes what the technique the researcher will going to apply, and the period indicates when the research is going to be conducted, and the place denotes where the research is to be conducted, and finally the people, obviously the respondents, who are all the respondents or the beneficiary of the research. While framing the objectives, these are all should be kept in mind. For example, if a student wants to carry out the research on the below topic, influence of service quality dimensions on customer satisfaction, a study with reference to some supermarkets in Chennai city. Now we can find out the main aim of the research, that the student wants to analyze the relationship between service quality dimensions on customer satisfaction.
It is mandatory for the researcher to be very clear with the dependent and independent variable. What is the dependent variable and what is the independent variable of the study?
Before understanding dependent and independent variable, it is very important to understand the term variable, because they are the basic units of information studied and assumed in research studies. The variables are factors, parameters, attributes or qualities of the cases that are being measured or recorded in the study. In simple sentence, we can say variable means something that varies. It may change from group to group, person to person, or even within one person over a time.
Independent variable. These variables are otherwise called controlled variables. They still vary, but the variation is relatively known or taken into account. Often there are many in a given study. That is, we can have many independent variables in a study. Dependent variable. The dependent variables are not controlled or manipulated. These vary in relation to the independent variables, and while results can be predicted, the data is always measured. In other words, simple sentence we can say independent variables are assumed cause variables, whereas dependent variables are called assumed effect variables.
The variable that functions as a dependent variable in one study may be an independent variable in another study. Depending on the design of the study, we may have more than one dependent or more than one independent variable. In our study, dependent variable would be customer satisfaction and independent variable would be service quality dimension. Here, the independent variable have many dimensions. That means we have many independent variables such as the service quality dimensions can be measured in terms of store image or brand name, responsiveness of the staff, customer care, trustworthiness or reliability, facilities available and so on. And customer satisfaction will be the dependent variable, which is only one dependent variable. Now, we can move to the another step of framing the objectives from the research aim. We can frame as many as objectives which is relevant to the topic. In our study, we can frame 3 or 4 objectives. Now we can frame 3 objectives, for example, as a beginner level. First, we can examine the relationship between service quality dimension and customer satisfaction. After finding out the relationship, we can analyze what are the service quality dimension factors that influences the customer satisfaction. And finally, we can study what are some other factors of customer satisfaction that they opt to buy the products from supermarket. After framing the objectives, which is very relevant to the topic, the next step we have to frame the hypothesis or the research question which is relevant to the topic. What do you mean by hypothesis? This is the $1,000,000 question of the researchers. The word hypothesis consists of 2 words, hypothesis. Hypo means tentative or subject to the verification. Thesis means a statement about a solution of a problem. That means, thus, the literal meaning of the term hypothesis is tentative statement about the solution of a problem. The formulation of hypothesis is important and foremost step in the researcher. It gives direction to the researcher to collect and process the facts to draw specific outcomes.
We have 2 types of hypothesis. One is null hypothesis, another one is alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis establishes that there is no relationship between 2 variables taken for the study. Whereas in the case of alternate hypothesis, the alternate hypothesis ensures that there is a relationship between the variables taken for the study. In our example, we can frame the hypothesis as below. The researcher can prove or disprove the relationship between service quality dimension and customer satisfaction. Same wise, the researcher can also prove or disprove the influence of service quality dimensions on customer satisfaction. Hence, the hypothesis can be as many as numbers depending upon the type of the study. Next step is to formulate the questionnaire for the collection of data. The other question is, what type of a questionnaire is to be framed? It mainly depends upon what type of a research the researcher is conducting. The questionnaire normally consists of 2 parts. The first session includes the demographic variables of the respondents, and second part, the statements related to the objectives. The demographic variables includes the name, gender, marital status, annual income, or what is the preference of their buying products, what is the distance they have to travel to buy the products from supermarket, what is the number of the family members, and how much amount they are spending for purchase, etc. In Likert 5-point scale, that is the second part of the questionnaire, consists the statements related to customer satisfaction and service domains of the supermarket. This is how the questionnaire has to be framed.
Once the questionnaire is framed, the next step is to circulate the questionnaire for data collection. As I said, questionnaire is consisting the series of questions in written format. It is a kind of an indirect interview and widely used tool for data collection. The success of this method depends on the proper drafting of the questions. Here, the researcher, by framing the questionnaire, indirectly insists that the data will be collected through primary source only, because it is the primary source of data collection. And secondary source of data collection can be used for literature review and to find out the research gap and all these things. While collecting the questionnaire, the researcher has to be very specific about the population and the sample size. The final step comes to data analysis. In this stage, the researcher makes out all the useful information that are required from the data that are collected for the study. Then, analysis part, the demographic variables can be analyzed with the help of simple percentage or frequency analysis. To obtain the results for the set objectives, multiple regression is the suitable one. Why we are using multiple regression? That is the $1,000,000 question. Most of the budding researcher get confused in using chi-square as well as regression. There is some basic difference between these two.
As we are all aware that regression analysis is a form of predictive modeling technique that investigates the relationship between a dependent and the independent variable. Hence, we are using the regression analysis for the current study. Another question, why we use multiple regression in our current topic? Mainly because our topic relates to the causal effect relationship. The multiple regression is used to mainly finding the causal effect relationship between variables. In our study, we have taken customer satisfaction as a dependent variable and service domains, various service domains as independent variables. It also involves predicting the value of dependent variable based on the value of independent variable. We are trying to analyze whether any small change in the independent variable cause any effect on dependent variable, that is customer satisfaction. Another thing, the researcher should know the difference between simple linear regression and multiple linear regression. In simple linear regression, there will be only one dependent and one independent variable. Whereas in multiple regression, we have only one dependent variable and many independent variables. In our study, we have only one dependent variable, that is customer satisfaction, and we have so many independent variables as service domains. Hence, we are using multiple regression in our analysis.
As everyone is aware, data analysis is the process of systematically applying statistical or logical techniques to describe, illustrate, and evaluate data. The appropriate analysis of research findings is essentially important in order to maintain data integrity. Analysis of data plays a vital role in any research as it summarizes collected data and discusses the interpretation of outcomes using multiple data sources. The data can be presented as frequency distribution table wherever appropriate.
Frequency distribution is the counting of responses or observations for each of the categories or codes assigned to a variable. Normally, this can be used for the demographic purposes and wherever necessary. To attain the outcome for the objectives in our example topic, we are using multiple regression, and the reason is already stated. The regression analysis reveals three different tables. One is model summary table, second one is ANOVA table, and the third one is the coefficient table. Through model summary table, we can see the relationship between two variables, whether the two variables have a positive relationship or negative association, whether the relationship is strong or weak, with the value of R square and other values available in the table. The second ANOVA table reveals the regression fit with the help of F value and significant value. And the third one is coefficient table. The coefficient table reveals the influence of independent variables on the dependent variable in individual item wise it reveals the value. Which factor influences more on the dependent variable? So likewise, the regression analysis explains the relationship under different tables to ensure the validity. If the researcher wants to find the differences between two groups of variables, they can go for chi-square test, t-test or u-test or ANOVA. Depends upon the nature of the data available and the information needed from the respondent. Similarly, if the researcher wants to know the relationship between variables, they can go for correlation or regression analysis. Some other advanced techniques like factor analysis, cluster analysis, discriminant analysis are also available for the researcher. These can be used based on the research type, the data available and the data required from the respondents. I hope this presentation will give you a lot of details about framing of objectives and what are the various statistical tools that can be used under different circumstances. Thank you. Stay home and stay safe.